Hey, everybody. It's been a while since we did a live stream. In fact, the last time we did one was with my good friend Rick Beato, who was here for the Punk's Force book release party on May 30th. And with all the goings on around the war in Ukraine, I thought it was a good time to do one. So we'll be taking your questions here as we go along. So if you have anything that you want to ask me, or if you have any thoughts, please put them in the chat, and we'll get to them in a second here. Speaking about the book, reminder: Punk's Force is out and available. In the episode description, there are all the links for where you can get it on Amazon in all formats, including Kindle and audiobook, and also the Naval Institute Press still has the offer of 40% off if you use the discount code PUNK40, and check that link in the episode description as well. So appreciate everybody who's purchased the book in the last few months, and all the folks who've written comments either on Goodreads or Amazon or the other places where you can write your thoughts. And again, I appreciate that. A couple other admin items. Tomorrow, Mrs. Mooch and I are headed for Reno for Tailhook 25. Tailhook will go on Thursday, Friday, Saturday at the Grand Sierra Resort in Reno. Great casino and resort. For years we were at the Nugget across town, and last year Hook moved to the GSR and had a fantastic time. So if you're in the area, there are walk-up registrations, and love to see you guys. We'll be at booth 800. We got some interviews going on. We're going to talk to the folks at Huntington Ingalls about Ford-class carrier construction. We're going to talk to the folks at Gentex about how they make their helmets. We'll talk to the executive director of Tailhook, Chaser Keithley, who was the first military advisor to the movie Top Gun Maverick. We just did that chat with Walleye, and he was talking about Ferg. So Ferg was the second military advisor during the movie. Chaser was the first. So we'll talk to him about his experiences in the early part of the production of Top Gun Maverick and what he's done with the Tailhook Association in recent years. He's an awesome guy. Also, how he got his call sign, that's a pretty cool story as well. And we got some other folks that will be coming by. We'll be talking to Hoser, our frequent co-host on the channel. He'll be out there, and we'll do a walk and talk like we did last year. So anyway, that's happening. As I said, we're leaving tomorrow, and we'll be out there Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So if you're around, please come say hi. And then next month, we'll be at the Oceana Air Show, NAS Oceana Air Show in Virginia Beach, just like we have been for the last 2 years. That is on, check my notes here, 19, 20, 21. 19 is the practice day. 20 and 21 are the public days. We had a blast there the last 2 years, last year particularly, gigantic crowds, 350,000 folks there. Cool demos, obviously. Headliner is the Blue Angels. But they also have demos by the F-35 demo team, the Rhino demo team, and the Raptor, which, I hate to say this, but the Raptor is my favorite demo. That airplane is all kinds of kick-ass. So come see us there if you're in the greater Virginia Beach area next month. All right, so let's get to the subject at hand here. On Friday, President Trump hosted President Putin at Elmendorf, Richardson, Joint Base Elmendorf, Richardson, formerly known as Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage, Alaska, for a summit. The summit end-to-end lasted about 3 hours. And so pretty incredible optics here, and also a pretty historic gathering. So let's talk about the for some reason it's hung up here. Hold on. Hold on, you guys. Remember, this is live. Let me remove the ticker. Maybe that froze it. Yeah, sorry, guys. We're having a little technical malfunction here. All right, let me stick another acid in there. Apologize. So just some background on the lead up to this this event. Obviously, everybody remembers February 22, Putin orders the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And fast forward to this campaign, candidate Trump campaigned with a promise to end the war on his first day in office. He became president on the 20th of January. February 12th, 2025, he held what's described as a surprise phone call with Putin, which led to negotiations between Russia and the U.S. For the first time since the invasion. And then later that same month, Secretary of State Marco Rubio began meeting with Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Saudi Arabia. And then through the months that followed, there were a lot of back and forths. He had phone calls and he did a number of Truth Social posts encouraging Putin to make the peace. He repeatedly threatened sanctions to impose beyond the ones that existed if he didn't stop attacking Ukraine. Putin ignored the warnings, and Trump did not, do anything beyond the existing sanctions. And then on the 8th of May, Trump warned that the U.S. would impose further sanctions on Russia if it didn't agree to a 30-day unconditional ceasefire. Russia rejected the ceasefire and continued to attack Ukraine. So later in May, June, and July, the missile and drone attacks on Ukraine by Russia increased dramatically. On July 23rd, Trump told reporters, "I go home, I tell the First Lady, I spoke to Vladimir today. We had a wonderful conversation." And she said, "Oh, really? Another Ukrainian city was just hit." And so in the wake of that back and forth, Trump posted some stuff on Truth Social that said that the Kremlin described as emotional. Then on July 14th, Trump announced the U.S. would impose more sanctions on Russia and 100% tariffs on countries that buy Russian oils if Putin did not agree to end the war within 50 days. On the 20th of July, he announced that the deadline would be shortened from 50 days to 12 days because of a lack of progress. And then Special Envoy Steve Witkoff met with Putin in Moscow on August 6th, 2 days before the deadline. Following that meeting, Trump said there was a quote-unquote good chance that a meeting with Putin would take place very soon. And then when that deadline arrived on August 8th, instead of imposing sanctions, Trump kind of had a surprise announcement that he's going to host Putin in Alaska on August 15th. And then right before that meeting, Trump warned that there would be what he described as severe consequences if Putin did not agree to a ceasefire. All right, so let me try this video again. Not sure why it's hung up. Yeah, I apologize. We're having a technical difficulty with this one. Let me try something here. I'm going to remove it, and then I'll try to add it again. Thanks for hanging with me here. All right, see if it'll continue. So you see the Putin's airplane, Air Force One. Here's Trump getting off the airplane, off of Air Force One. You know, pretty remarkable ceremony here. It's about 3.5 minutes. So let's just let's watch how this comes together here. And then obviously here comes Putin down his ladder. A reminder that Alaska was bought by the United States in what date was that? 1867, I think, for just over $7 million. There's a lot of Russian Orthodox churches in Alaska. I don't know if it was a Freudian slip or intentional, but going into this meeting, Trump told the press corps on several occasions that he was going to Russia for this this summit, and the press made a lot of hay out of that. So, you know, this is as I said, a historic summit. First time they've met, the American leader has met since with the Russian leader since the invasion of Ukraine. And Trump waiting patiently for him to come down the red carpet. It's a lot of red carpet between Trump's red carpet and Putin's red carpet. He's clapping. Come on, keep coming. A lot of critics are saying, okay, this is, you know, inappropriate. Putin is wanted by The Hague and war crimes and so forth and so on. You know, no meetings are not going to result in peace, as has been the case with the previous administration. We weren't getting anywhere by not talking to them. Reminder that during the Obama administration, when Putin took Crimea, we didn't really flinch at all. And I think Putin took that as a sign that we wouldn't care about any further invasions of Ukrainian territory. So they're walking up to a stage, and you can see they start to see a flyover here. So pretty cool. So we've got B-2 flanked by 4 F-35s. A lot of media have inaccurately identified these as Raptors F-22s. They're not Raptors, they're F-35s. The F-35s are based at Elmendorf, as we've documented during the Midnight Hammer episode some weeks ago. All of the B-2s are based at Whiteman in Missouri. So there goes the flyover, different view from another vantage point. And Trump says something to Putin like, you know, pretty cool, huh? Or whatever it would be. I'd love to know what they actually said there. So a little bit of a photo op here, and then they make their way to the meeting. So that's a pretty cool ceremony. I don't care what your political affiliation is. And bravo on that sort of show of air power might with the flyover. The other thing you note there is the red carpet was flanked by Raptors-based, the Elmendorf-based Raptors. So that's another cool look there, as well as the color guard on either side of him. So, good form there. A lot of critics were criticizing, that particular part of the event, and I think that's off. That was pretty well done. So they went from that to a sit down with here you see Lavrov, Putin, Trump, and Marco Rubio, Secretary of State Rubio, and Steve Witkoff, who's been the special envoy, been a busy guy since the inauguration. He's gone all kinds of places. He also was trying to end the Houthi thing and had some success with that, as well as, keep the Iranians, in their box, as it were. So at this sit down, they discussed whether or not there would be a ceasefire, what are the ways forward, so forth and so on. They did a little bit of a stand-up, and Putin kind of, used it for some of his, let's call it propaganda, about the justification for his invasion. And President Trump kind of went on a little bit of campaign type of speech about Russia, and so forth and so on, and the need to end the war. And they ended with a cordial handshake. As I said before, it was all over in about 3 hours. Nothing definitive. Some rumors have it that there was supposed to be a stand-up, there was supposed to be a sidebar meeting that followed this, that at one point was going to include Zelensky, but for whatever reason that didn't happen. Okay, so now fast forward. So that was Friday. Fast forward to Monday. Trump invites Zelensky to the Oval Office. You remember back a few months ago, we did the episode, and very well documented and publicized, about that taunting that Zelensky got at the hands of J.D. Vance and some of the press corps that was gathered, and Trump. The whole back and forth about, you don't have the cards, and with us you have cards, and it was just kind of ugly. Rumor had it that Trump kind of threw him out, and he left, summarily following this. They gave him grief that he wasn't wearing a tie at that time, and so you'll note that at this one he's wearing a tie. It's this kind of black ensemble, and you can tell by their expressions that they, it was more cordial, it was more productive. So following that, they went to a meeting with some EU leaders in the East Room. So one-on-one in the Oval Office. The East Room is immediately adjacent to the Oval Office. I had a chance to sit down with President George W. Bush back in, what was that, 2007, for a meeting in the East Room, and also he gave us a tour of the. No, I apologize, I'm getting confused here. The East Room is the ceremonial room, and where they have parties. I've done Medals of Freedom ceremonies and the White House holiday party. That's the East Room. I'm thinking of the Roosevelt Room that is adjacent to the Oval Office. So in any case, at this meeting, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, and Finland, President Alexander Stubb. So pretty amazing gathering of EU leaders and the NATO Secretary General. There was some rumor that they invited themselves. That is not true. A few credible sources have indicated that the White House invited them, and that's appropriate and proper. Also, certainly had a calming effect, because there's no way that they're going to be able to move forward on any substantive peace process without the EU buy-in, because as President Trump said, this is going to be the EU's to solve more than the United States going forward. And we've had some of those conversations with Justin Bronk in recent months. So some of the takeaways from that meeting. So at first, President Trump had demanded a ceasefire, but after his sit down with after his sit down with Putin, he kind of backed off of that and said, well, maybe we don't need a ceasefire. The EU and the NATO Secretary General are very adamant that a ceasefire is a fundamental part of any way forward. So we'll see how that goes. The next thing that emerged is probably the next thing that will happen here, which is what they're calling a trilateral meeting, which would be very historic. So trilat means Zelensky, Putin, and Trump. No word on when or where that would happen, but that's in the cards. The other thing that they were talking about is, okay, so what are the protection guarantees? What are the security guarantees for Ukraine? And we'll bring up the ISW map here in a second and talk about the specific areas of contention and who owns what at this moment, because that's probably the long pole in the tent. You've heard them talk about land swaps and other things, so we'll chat about that in a second. But the security guarantees, at first they were talking about, okay, maybe we should talk about Article 5 style guarantees. And that's NATO Article 5, which means if you attack one, you attack all of us. So should we project or give an umbrella to Ukraine, not a member of NATO, and certainly as long as President Trump is president, will not be a member of NATO. And as we've discussed over the last 2 years, that's certainly a provocative move. And that's part of what President Putin has said caused him to feel like he had to invade Ukraine, because there was serious momentum towards Ukraine becoming a member of NATO. So that's not going to happen as part of this peace process. But the EU and NATO leadership brought up, okay, so let's provide Article 5-like guarantees of security. And Steve Witkoff, the special envoy, also mentioned that, yeah, maybe that's a good idea. That was pulled off the table, and President Trump has said, okay, we want to do guarantees, that they need security guarantees. But as he quoted here, what he said is, okay, you're going to have security guarantees. Let me find the exact quote here. We're going to be discussing it today. This is President Trump, meaning at this meeting, but we'll give him very good protection, very good security. And he later confirmed that Putin said Russia would accept security guarantees for Ukraine, although it's unclear what specifically that means. It does not mean Article 5 like guarantees. The president specifically said that we're not talking about Article 5 guarantees. So those are the big stumbling blocks, as it were, the things that we'd have to work through. So let me bring up the map here, and then I'll get to the chat. Okay, so that meeting adjourns on Monday. They hit the high points that we were just talking about. Here's the map, and this is the devil in the details. You've heard talk about a quote unquote land swap in recent weeks as a way to solve the war in Ukraine. Okay, so we always have used ISW as the standard for what's going on in terms of who owns what land. Look at the legend here. So light blue is claimed Ukrainian counteroffensive. So that's basically this swath of land to the north. Light red is assessed Russian-controlled advances here in Luhansk and in the southern rim here towards Odessa. And then the red hatched areas are areas that were Russian controlled before the invasion in February of 2022. So that's Crimea and it's Donetsk Oblast. So when you hear about the Donbass, that's Luhansk and Donetsk. That's not this other one with Mariupol and on the border of Zaporizhia where the nuke power plant is. So what's problematic here is only the hash marked lines are the status quo before the invasion. So, the general stat put out is there have been over 1 million people killed in this war. A lot of young Ukrainian soldiers and civilians have been killed. President Zelensky is not willing just prima facie to just cede that land. So Putin's going in position for a land swap is he wants all of the light red areas in addition to the hatched areas. He also wants Ukraine to give back the Russian territory, basically the cursed incursion that they have taken in recent years. And again, that's something that it's not really strategically important, but it's something that the Ukrainians have done to prove A, they can do it, and B, to have some bargaining chips. So you can see annotated here next to each one of these areas is the main effort of Russia is taking ground in eastern Ukraine. The subordinate main effort is capture Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts. And then the next supporting effort is take ground around Zaporizhia, the nuke power plant and other industrial importance things. Subordinate main effort number one is the Kharkiv operation. They have been attacking Kharkiv in recent days, again, to President Trump's frustration and the First Lady's frustration. So, we have a peace process. President Trump walks away, thinks it's gone pretty well, cool flyover, great pomp and circumstance, and then wake up and he sees the TV and Kharkiv is on fire. A unprecedented magnitude drone attack last 2 nights. The Ukrainian effort is to keep pushing north into Russian territory, as well as holding off the Eastern Front, as it were. So, there's incremental gains back and forth. I invite you to go to ISW and read their detailed reports. It's really granular, and also it's eminently readable. I check it on a daily basis. Really, really good intel on what's happening. But the bottom line is that it's been a slog. I mean, this has been the basic shape of the map since, almost 3 years now, as we say every time we talk to Justin about the war in Ukraine or Scott Kelly or whomever we're talking to. So the whether or not we can get people to the table in this trilat, what you see there is it's no minor thing how you're going to solve the war. Okay, so security guarantees, what are we looking at in terms of who gets what pieces of land, kind of thing? Will there be a ceasefire ahead of time? Putin doesn't want it. And now Trump has gone from I need it to we don't need it. EU wants it. NATO wants it. So those are the main issues. All right. So as I mentioned, the next thing we're looking for is when is this trilat between Zelensky, Putin, and Trump going to happen? All right. That's all the setup. I apologize for, no, I don't apologize. Well, I apologize for the technical detail or problem. Obviously, we got it back ultimately. So let's look at some of the questions here. So RJS says Russia is losing about 1,000 troops every single day, over 1 million dead. Roger that, and that that you would think, and we had sort of hypothesized that was going to be something that ultimately would end the war, and that was like years ago. You remember Wagner Group? Remember those guys? They were losing a lot of guys. They were pressing prisoners into service. They were down on manpower. So the war of attrition has not ended Putin's desire to take what he intended at the outset. His original goals haven't changed. Further, Zelensky's original goals haven't changed, and that includes he wants repatriation of all of Ukraine to pre-2014 borders, so that includes Crimea. So good luck with that. So as long as everybody's on their sides here, this idea of a land swap is no minor thing to solve. Meanwhile, the hostilities continue in earnest. Nobody's putting their guns down. So again, as folks have kind of made fun of President Trump about, you said you would solve this in 24 hours during the campaign. Here we are 8 months into your administration and we're nowhere, right? So, okay, roger that. You've got to give President Trump credit for getting together with Putin, and so he's in his own, sort of ham-fisted way, let's say, he makes moves forward, and he deserves credit for that for sure. So user CW3IU2Y L9 Delta, why should Putin be allowed to dictate anything when he's a murderer? He used chemical weapons to murder people in Europe. He's killing people in Ukraine, kills Russians, on and on and on. Copy that. However, he is the president of Russia. And so in that capacity, he's the guy that we got to deal with, That's part of why they wanted to go to Alaska, because it's not too far from Russia. In the event they had to get out of there real quick, if somebody tried to do a rendition or something, The Hague, tried to capture him or whatever, that would have never happened. And if you look at that video, you can see Trump's guys, goons, are dressed in sort of a gabardine outfit or olive drab outfit, and they're shadowing Trump's Secret Service guys. So there was a lot of Secret Service and bodyguard presence, even when they were walking across the tarmac there. So why a second account? I'm sorry, but guarantees for your current POTUS aren't worth the airtime that they occupy. Okay. And that's the same thing people are saying and this is a good point that Blue Neptune brings up. Putin will cooperate and then make a new excuse to attacking him. This is the security guarantees part that everybody's like, okay, I got it. But why should we trust this guy? He's violated everything he said he would do at any given time. His word isn't worth a thing. So you can do a trilat, you can sit down, you can say, here are the security guarantees, absent an Article 5, and this is the EU and NATO Secretary General's point, absent the threat of an Article 5 response in the event that Putin goes beyond whatever the status quo is going to be with a peace negotiation, then why would he not just sort of wait the Western world out and then make his move as he intended in February of 2022? Right? This is sort of what North Vietnam did with the United States and our allies in the mid-70s when they, after we left Saigon, that disastrous pullout, they just were like, okay, let's just hang out for basically 2 years, and then we'll make our move and we'll go south. And we didn't lift a finger. Right. So what's to stop Putin from doing the same thing? Right. Because we've lost our appetite to direct support. We're going to do it through the EU. We're selling billions of dollars of weapons to both the EU, and that was part of the negotiation on Monday, we'll sell Ukraine weapons, but there's going to be no boots on the ground. And we're also going to sort of back away from our direct support of Ukraine. That was the sort of main feature of the Biden administration's support. All right. Robert Hume says, Putin wants trilat while he reconstitutes drones from Iran. The Europeans are just trying to drag out American support for 6 months or so until they can fully support. I think you could be right, Robert. So this, again, it's the specter of Vietnam. So ceasefires in the early 70s were used by Vietnam to reconstitute their SA-2 supplies. And then once the ceasefire was over, particularly our B-52s took massive hits, Operation Linebacker. And so if you look at the number of bombers, not to mention our attack aircraft, Air Force and carrier-based attack aircraft, from 70 to 72, the numbers were pretty high. So that could well be what he is doing at this time. So do we have any intel on that supply chain, right? So this is a sort of other shoe dropping after Midnight Hammer. So we take it to them in an unflinching way with B-2 strike, cruise missiles off of Navy submarines, Growlers assisting with some suppression of any enemy air defenses, Israeli Air Force doing Pathfinder, an amazing mission, a huge success. And props to the B-2 crews for that 37-hour thing. Got all the GBU-57s on the appropriate aim points. BDA, depending on your source, either was right on and has set them back years or months. But in any case, that operation was not lost on Iranian leadership. All right, so now are we behind the scenes going, do not sell drones to Russia? Is that something we have the leverage to do? But I think you're right, Robert. That's probably the case. And I think you're also right, because the EU is not, they've plussed up their defense budgets. They've gone all in terms of their statements. But as Justin points out, without the United States, they're not where they need to be in terms of systems like ATACMS, Patriot, the other stuff that only we make. So I think you're not wrong with that statement. Brian Protus says, Ukraine has won this war. We are making Moscow sue for peace. If you mean they have won it, what I would say is they haven't lost it. And so in not losing it all these years later, in some ways that is kind of a win, but they haven't won it. And remember, there was the spring offensive a year ago that maybe that was actually 2 years ago. I think that was in 2023. That didn't result in a meaningful change in the map, the ISW map. And at that point, you're like, okay, we're in a stalemate here. So a stalemate, I would say, Brian, is not a win, but they haven't lost. And at some level, that is a win. So we're making Moscow sue for peace, but Putin is disinterested in a tie. Just like Ukraine has too much of a blood and treasure investment in defending the homeland, Putin has the same on his end in trying to take back, reconstitute the former Soviet Union. So, and that's the other thing that people have criticized President Trump by saying, okay, you just gave him 3 years worth of sort of a gift. So now has parity. You put him on the world stage. Now he can look at the homeland. In fact, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but Russian personnel carriers and tanks in the Donbass are flying American flags alongside Russian flags as sort of a, we won that summit kind of thing. And so, again, critics are saying that this meeting shouldn't have happened. And that is sort of just ceding your advantage and not making them and not suing them for peace, right? Okay, so again, we weren't getting anywhere with stonewalling them and not meeting with them. Kind of like the same with Iran, and in this way, the Trump administration's foreign policy it has been successful. The just stonewalling and not talking, and this isn't even an opinion, hasn't gotten us anywhere in either the Middle East or in Ukraine. So again, we'll see. Meeting happened, nothing substantive, no ceasefire. Second meeting on Monday at the White House happens, nothing substantive, no ceasefire. Things introduced, and then the next thing is this trilat. So you would imagine that if that happens, if you get Trump, Putin, and Zelensky in the same room, then you're going to have to pull out a map and go, okay, and this is the art of the deal, right? This is where, in theory, President Trump should be at his best. Like, okay, guys, look, what if you gave him this and so forth and so on? Defenders of Ukraine are saying that's impossible. Okay, I hear you. However, without some sort of compromise, whatever form that would take, this war is just going to grind on, and we know what direction that takes. Okay. Stove Topicus says possession is 9/10 of the law. That is true. And so when you go into this trilat, that's absolutely true. Okay, but that goes both sides. So part of the trilat is, or part of the land swap is, okay, Ukraine, the area that you've held them off that they think is Russian territory, meaning, let me bring up the map again real quick. Again, if you look at this map, you're like, okay, never mind Crimea, but the Donbass, the non-hatched area, if you're saying that just the red shaded area needs to be now Russia, then the Ukrainians are going to go, that means we move out? You're saying we leave places? You know, the citizens of Ukraine are not going to want to do that, you know, at a glance. So, but you're correct. And again, this is where the trilat would be an amazing gathering in terms of, okay, so what happened? Type X ellipse, no need for such a peace and no deal. We can supply Ukraine from the EU, and if the USA doesn't, NATO's done, and US forces have to leave Germany. Okay. I certainly, and again, I keep referring to Justin Bronk, but as Justin has pointed out, the calculus and the relationship between the United States and EU and NATO has shifted dramatically in the last 8 months. And so President Trump believes that the war in Ukraine is a EU problem. You know, so you guys are talking about if he takes Ukraine, then the next is Romania and Hungary and Poland and so forth. So he's like, okay, I hear you. So what are you going to do about it? You know, as you guys are paying a pittance in terms of your support of NATO, you're not hitting your targets, and your defense budgets are very low relative to the percentage of the United States, you know, budget, national budget in terms of the defense budget, right? And so, I mean, I think that's sound logic. So, you know, we've seen them plus up, them meaning EU, plus up defense budgets. We've seen them say, okay, if Trump is bailing, then, you know, you see hugs in front of 10 Downing Street. You see Macron there, you know, greeting Zelensky. He's in Germany. He's in Finland. And okay, you guys got it, right? But as President Trump has said, even if I say you've got it, we're not totally punting on this. So we will always be there behind you guys in whatever form. Anderson, OLB 1793 says a rushed peace deal will be catastrophic. That's absolutely right. You know, so that's why it doesn't seem like we're rushing. Now, certainly, again, Putin is a green eye shade, steely operator. You know, he holds his cards close to his chest. Even when he smiles, it kind of looks sinister, right? So, you know, you don't want to be across the table from him just throwing stuff out willy-nilly. He's not going to give something up just because it seems like he's not terribly interested in peace to the degree that the West is. I think obviously President Zelensky wants to stop losing the citizens of the country and his military, but he has got the public will, and he's been pretty dogged about, look, we're not going to just backtrack just so we stop the war. So Anderson, you're right. A rush peace deal would be catastrophic. Again, let's keep our eyes on the current events here and see what percolates in terms of this trilat. Christian Volpescu says, sweet talk to Putin is just for our psychology. After Alaska, he hasn't given up on any of his initial imperial aims. Good point. So again, it gets to what are the security guarantees? That's a huge part of any peace deal. So, okay, whether or not we have a ceasefire, sit down at the table, hammer out a peace deal. At that point, the shooting stops. So that's a de facto ceasefire, on day one of executing a peace deal. But then when everybody goes home, what are the guarantees? And as we can imagine, the only thing that Putin is going to honor is the threat that if he moves beyond whatever the deal is for peace, that he's going to get hammered, and probably not just by the EU. Do we believe that that would be enough of a what's the word I'm looking for? Enough of to keep him from making that move? All right, let's go through a few more of these. Here's our good friend Doug Sherman. What's the strategic importance of the territories in question other than the rare earth minerals? That's a great question. The industrial base of Ukraine is farther west. As we mentioned, the Zaporizhia is the nuke. There's other nuke plants around. The shipbuilding takes place at Odessa. Access to the Black Sea, but that's where Kuznetsov was constructed, and that's what they want back. They have Sevastopol when they took Crimea. That's no minor thing, but they want Odessa too. They want that land bridge to Odessa. I think it's just hearts and minds, and it's if he creeps into this, what was Ukraine, and now he wants it to be Russia, what's to stop him from going across the Dnipro, making his way to Kyiv, and all the way to Lviv ultimately. So I think it is the rare earth minerals, Doug, ultimately, but it's also the sovereign Ukraine. Good question, though. LSO, poor communication, but we love you. Go around. Yeah, thank you, Raging Menace. All right, let's do a couple more here. Again, thanks for showing up. Iron Gran says, this is why I disagree Russia is quote unquote winning. If when America went into Iraq, only occupied 20% of the country and lost 1 million men, would commentators have said America is winning the Iraq war? No. I think that analogy is right on. Right? So again, it goes to Ukraine is winning by not losing. Right? This map, again, let me bring this up. This map, let me remove your comment real quick. This map with incremental gains back and forth has kind of been the way it's been since summer of 2022. All right, it's been basically this shape. Ukraine did a nice job of holding them off to the north at the outset, did a kind of amazing job of pushing back into the light blue shaded areas and actually taking Russian soil. And the rest has been, Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, Kherson. Remember, there was that big deal about them repatriating Kherson, the liberation of Kherson, and then the Russians took it back and forth. Again, Zaporizhia is under Russian control, the power plant, rather, not the city of Zaporizhia, but the power plant, the nuke power plant. But I think your analogy is right on. I mean, that's good stuff. Let's get to some other comments here. Pelican Island Lab says in Article 5, guarantee is the only thing that will stop Russia again. I think you're right. But when you say Article 5, it's so provocative to Putin because it starts to sound like, well, you're making him a de facto member of NATO. And that's what I can't tolerate. So I'm not saying Putin's right. I'm just saying if you see it Putin's way, this is the kind of thing that, he used to justify the invasion in 2022 in the first place. This is why any possible peace deal is complicated. Land swaps, peace guarantees, ceasefire or no. So what is it that will be watertight? Let's say they hammer it out. You get this, we get this. Compromises made on both sides, which again, at a glance is problematic, but let's say they make it happen at this trilat. Then the other thing is, okay, so what are the peace guarantees? It can't be Article 5. You say Article 5, as somebody said earlier, he's going to use that to justify another move west, another invasion. But I think you're right. So this is the criticism, Graham 7478, of this meeting. Another NATO country would have arrested Putin. America welcomed him to a meeting. Murderous dictator, shame. That's what the critics are saying. Those who see it other than that are like, okay, except he is the president of Russia. We have to deal with Russia. That's the guy, right? He's not going to just send somebody else because people think I'm a murderous dictator. So goods and others. Okay, good. They're talking. There's sort of discussions about what are the stumbling blocks, what are the bullets, what are the items that would be part of a peace deal. Okay, that conversation is advancing the prospect of peace in and of itself. Okay, so that's good. Nothing was happening to that respect with the previous administration, and okay. The other part, though, is now you've legitimized Putin. And as I just said a few minutes ago, that, sort of just ceded the high ground, ceded the gains made where he was marginalized in a box, pariah on the world stage. Now you just sort of erase all of that. Okay, so is that what's necessary? Is that the utilitarian calculus that, somebody like President Trump has to go through to get to his campaign promise of ending the war in Ukraine, never mind in 24 hours, but ultimately ending the war in Ukraine? All right, let's do a couple more here. John Smith, is it normal for POTUS to walk 100 feet to get out on the red carpet, then just run out? I don't, that's a great question. Maybe they ran out. I mean, that's a lot of red carpet if you think about it, right? Or they had to cut the long red carpet into 2 red carpets to go from Putin's airplane to Air Force One. I don't know. Good point, though, right? Why a second account? Good coverage, Mooch. Thank you. Apologize for the stumbling. I don't do these live streams very often, and maybe that's why. Anderson points out, Tet Offensive happened during a ceasefire. Good point. Again, they reconstituted, got themselves marshaled during the ceasefire. Okay, last one. Ward, what do you think the RZZIN arguments for security guarantees and RZZIN guarantees of European borders is an opening gambit to allow PLA and NK troops on Europe soil? Oh, wow, that's a interesting. So that's the World War III doomsday scenario, right? Yeah. So we've already seen North Korea helping Russia in Ukraine, right? Disastrous for them. So I think they're snake bit. Kim is snake bit. That's not going to, I don't think that's going to happen. China, different animal. Certainly their focus is, the first island chain, second island chain, pushing it out. You guys may have seen Sal's coverage, particularly of the bumper cars there between the Philippine Navy and the Chinese Navy in recent weeks. So I don't think they have the bandwidth, let's just say, to take advantage of any opening around Ukraine in the event of a security situation that looks to be less than watertight. But it's certainly something we have to think about. And again, I think what you bring up here, Nolan, is we have to make sure that these security guarantees are ironclad. All right. Again, thanks, guys. We had a fairly decent crowd here. We've been going for just over an hour, including, 20 minutes of a technical problem. But thanks. All right. Again, headed to Hook tomorrow. If you're in Reno, come say hi. Air show at Oceana next month, 19, 20, 21 in Virginia Beach. If you're around, love to see you. Last year, we were really had a line to say hello, both public days, all day long. Folks came as far away as Wisconsin and upstate New York. I love that. I love meeting folks in real life and hearing stories and getting handed state trooper patches. I have a huge box of challenge coins and stuff that you guys have given me when we meet face to face. That's the best part of this channel. And your support is the best part of this channel. So we'll be doing some interviews out there. So look for that. Obviously, we'll be on the case with our subject matter experts across the planet, whether it's Kevin Maurer. I'm going to actually talk to Kevin about another part of Trump's foreign policy, as we chatted about before, but now it looks imminent, which is the strike on the cartels. We have intel that says that it is imminent. And they said, but do not call it an invasion. So we think it would be more like a rising lion kind of a thing. Israeli Air Force against Iran, air-powered drones, some manned aircraft, stealth manned aircraft, less of a Abbottabad Bin Laden takedown, probably no boots on the ground. Although, as Evan Hafer said to Joe Rogan, we would just take it to him. We'll see, but we have intel that it's imminent. So look for that episode in a couple of days. Going to post-produce it while I'm out in Reno. Already talked to Kevin about that. He has an article in the current issue of Rolling Stone about that. And then other stuff as it comes up, right? We'll cover current events. Thanks for indulging me with some of my music stuff with my good friend Van Romain. If you haven't checked out that episode, just cool stuff. And there is sort of some, analogs about, having a career as a musician and a career as a guy in a fighter squad. And there are some overlaps and so forth and so on. So, and then the episode with the show that we did at the book release party for Punk's Force. Again, check out the links for that. But you talk about bucket list, playing with Steve Morse on the same stage, a guy that I've idolized since I was a midshipman. I got my first Dixie Dregs album my plebe year. And his drummer Van, Steve Morse Band, is going on tour here coming up in October. And so if you've never seen them, you really should check that out. We'll post on my Instagram. I'll post what that tour is looking like. We're going to try to shadow those guys for a couple of days during that tour. They are coming to Annapolis on October 16th. So if you're in the Annapolis area, Ram's Head on stage is where they're going to play. Anyway, that opportunity was amazing. And so again, I thank you for indulging my music side. I know a lot of people are like, I don't come here for this. Okay. This channel, as I said in my welcome to the channel, it's a lot of things. It's about writing. It's about music. It's mostly about airplanes. It's become about current events since the invasion of Ukraine. I kind of pivoted with the help of Justin Bronk, but since that time, cover the war in the Middle East, heavy focus on Houthis and carrier strike groups. To that point, we'll hear a lot about what Harry S. Truman did at Hook. They're going to do a debrief of the CAG and the strike group commander are going to do a debrief about how that all went down. I'm sure we'll hear more stuff about the blue on blue that we detailed in recent months, and how did the jet fall off the elevator and so forth and so on, and the collision. Unfortunate for our good friend Captain Snowden. Maybe we'll see Chowda Hill out there. I don't know if Chowda is going to be there. He's now the chief of staff at Air Land. He's no longer the CEO of Truman. He went from Ike to Truman after Captain Snowden got removed for the collision at sea. So we'll hear all of the stuff about that, and we'll be reporting out from Hook. So again, if you're not a subscriber, become one so you don't miss anything, as I always say. And thank you guys for showing up here. Not quite no notice, but almost. And I look forward to talking to you guys again very soon.